Amukoso Eddie Obiako. You're probably used to my voice. Now you can see my face. And welcome to the video podcast for hashtag share my experience. Now, I said a lot in the podcast. I gave a lot of stories based on the experiences of myself, people, friends, colleagues, people that I know, random people of the internet. But then they were all relatable stories that I'm sure you could find yourself in at some point or the other. And so the point of this whole video experience is to be able to discuss this in depth. The podcast has stories, they're short, punchy. Yes, I gave the afterword, but this is an opportunity to expand on some of these discussions. I'll share my views and get guests also to share their views as well. But more importantly, I want to hear your views. So share your experience on our social media handles and tag us on the things that you do, videos, comments, reels, whatever. Would love to share your experiences with you. Now, in this first episode, I'll be talking about the things that were discussed in episode 1, My Own Person, which was basically a coming of age story of a young girl at the time who experienced quite a lot of verbal abuse, and her teenagers were just difficult and dark. And so I can't wait to go on this video journey with you guys, and I hope that you stick with me through
it. Discuss teen relationship with parents.
So I know many people asked me, whose story was that you shared in episode 1, My Own Person? And I'll say that it's an amalgamation of stories. Mine, people I know, friends, neighbors, siblings, everyone. It's not an unfamiliar story. Many people probably went through the same or even worse. If I think about my teen years, I'll say that my early teens were great, and then my later teens not so great. And I can't really say where the break started from or where the transition came from, but all I knew that was one day I was a young child growing up, getting away with everything, and then the next I had to be responsible, and my dynamics with my parents changed almost irrevocably. For most people, their teen years are very confusing, and I guess mine were too. And even though it started out seemingly normal, sometimes I think that there was something very abnormal about it as well. It was a very confusing time. My parents weren't exactly my best friends, I mean, my dad wasn't really around as much as, standard dads were, because he worked in the military, so he was always, out and about. And my mom, now retrospectively, I understand what it was. She seemed very distant and almost always angry. But I figured that it was probably frustration, being left alone with 4 children and 2 in their teens at the same time, because my brother and I are very close in age. So I didn't feel like I had that relationship. And I'm not sure most people did. Perhaps maybe if you did, you want to share with me. I'll be interested to know, people who had like good, fantastic relationships with their parents in their teens, meaning no misunderstandings, no butting heads and conflict. For me, I felt like that was what my teens were around. I was always grounded, for example, because as much as I wanted to stay in line, I didn't want to stay in line as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but I was very scared of like getting in trouble and, doing things that would warrant punishment and, the likes. But at the same time, I didn't like it. So I'll do things that weren't quite in line. So I always ended up, being grounded or getting into trouble.
Is there really a thin line between discipline and abuse in our culture and society?
I'd say that in our culture and society today, there's a blurred line between what we consider now as abuse and what our parents considered as discipline. And I think this is because of just the generational gap, if you will. Now, many people would think that, if I spoke, or when I hear a lot of people speak, you think that they dislike their parents or maybe almost hate them for the way they raised them. And I have many friends who will say things like, I'm not raising my children how I was raised because it was not right. It was abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, etc. But I think that for them, they did the best that they could under the conditions that, the generation demanded. Now, that's how they grew up. That's how they were disciplined, and they disciplined us the same way. But I know that the same can't apply to today. For example, there's much more awareness. There's people I know from my generation who don't spank their kids. They don't believe that, laying a hand on their kids is necessary. They think that you can just speak to them and, there's something that I heard, it's called gentle parenting. You talk to children and tell them what to do. Would I spank my children? Absolutely, right? Would I spank them excessively? No. But I don't believe that children are mature enough or a stage where you can speak to them. Now, it'll depend on age. Obviously, as they grow, you have to flex it. But I don't think that young children who misbehave should be spoken to. They don't understand, they can't comprehend, in my opinion. And there's different cognitive abilities that children have at different stages, which also comes into play. So do I consider spanking physical abuse? No. Excessively, yes. Verbal abuse, now that's another one. I think that's a more touchy subject for me, because we grew up, when I think about my generation, I think we just grew up as a very verbally abusive generation. I don't know about you, but we had something they used to say called wording, where you sit down and you basically just insult each other and each other's mothers and fathers, and it was a game. How can there be a verbally abusive game that was a thing that was trending at that time? But it was because it was a norm. Everyone would say things like, are you mad? Are you stupid? You dey craze? All those kind of things. And it was a normal thing to just, abuse people. Look at the word, it's even abuse. But then it didn't mean anything to us. But at the same time, it did mean a lot. Personally, I know that I carried and probably still carry around a lot of things that were said to me as a child or as a teenager. In that time when I was confused, trying to figure stuff out, and I'm hearing these things that were just abuses. But they stuck. They did. So verbal abuse is still verbal abuse. I don't know. I can't get over it. So would I speak to my children the way that I was spoken to? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And being a woman of faith and understanding the power of words and understanding, how as Christians we're taught to use our words to build up and not tear down. Understanding that there's power in our tongue. We are created beings, and our Creator created by speaking. And if we're made in the image and likeness of God, then when we speak, we are creating. So what kind of world am I trying to create? What kind of mindset am I trying to create in my children if I don't speak the right words to them? So, yeah. Verbal abuse is still almost unforgivable, but of course we're Christians. I am a Christian, so I will forgive, but no, I don't think it's acceptable. Wasn't in that generation, isn't now, will never be.
How are parents' words influential? What was your experience and effect on you as an adult?
Now, one of the things that I discussed, or one of the things that was highlighted in the podcast, was how the child was in her school bus and heard people talking about, how their parents' words are very powerful. And it made me, it reminded me of like my secondary school. Like people would say, when you have exams or you have something to do, let your mother pray for you. Or, if something is bad, when your mother prays for you and just don't do anything bad, or because you know that if your parents curse you, you cannot escape it. So we know that the words that parents speak over children are very powerful, at least, in the child's mind. And think about it. If your parent is your parent is your covering growing up, right? And so if the person that is covering you is speaking down to you or saying the wrong things, even in anger, I've heard horrible stories from people. I think one of the worst things I heard, there was a girl that I knew who was telling me about, she grew up with a single mother and she was the only child and her parents never got married. And I think they had a really bad relationship. I want to imagine that it would have been one of those situations where the man would deny the child and say, it's not my child or whatever. And then the woman would keep it. But then going forward, it wasn't a good experience. I can never forget, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. But when her mom was angry and she would beat her, she would say things like, die. Why don't you just die? Why didn't you just die? Why are you still here? She was like, as a child, she remember her mom would slam her head on the wall or pin her head to the wall and say things like, die. Why didn't you just die? Why don't you just die? Now imagine what kind of damage that would do to a child. Like this person I met her as an adult. But the day she told me that story, I could see the emotions were palpable. And I couldn't believe it. And that's not even the worst that I've heard. I'm sure people out there would have stories as well that they can tell. But this doesn't make it better. So even if the woman had a bad time, even if it was not a good experience for her, but to have a child wake up every day or one day and think about how all her mother wanted her to do was die. It's horrible. I can't even, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. It's a horrible thing. And that's an extreme case. But just like in the podcast, the other person got told, you're useless. And probably grew up feeling useless. People that say, you're stupid, you can never do anything well, no matter how well you can do stuff. Let's just look at it even in on the flip side. We all know how TikTok videos, I know I've seen these videos of these Chinese children trying to learn taekwondo or all these things, and they fail and their parents are telling them, no, you can do it, you can, and at the end you see the child do it. Or one very viral video that I'm sure I watched almost 50 times, this young girl who was a gymnast. And her dad used to throw her and catch her. She kept falling and falling. And dad was like, no, you can't do it. It took so many attempts, but in the end, she did it. At one point, she was even crying and her dad called her and, spoke to her and said, don't worry, you can do it. The power of the father's encouraging words was what made her end up, getting the routine. So if there's so much power that can motivate you, imagine how much power can demotivate you. Especially when the words have just been hammered into your head for years. It's terrible. So yes, parents' words are strong. They are powerful. And I think that the onus should be on, parents of this generation to take those things into consideration. Now, I know that there is a big disparity because some people are so far removed from their own experiences that they believe that, I must raise my children. And I've seen this happen, raise my children a different way. And I'm seeing people in my generation raising some pretty rotten and horrible children. No manners, no responsibility, no accountability, no character. Because the parents have said, no, please, I don't want them to be raised like I was. So I think it's about finding balance at the end of the day, right? But I don't think anybody in this generation has any business raising children with harsh words, with wrong words, with words that don't build them up or tear them down. Yes, I know everybody gets angry every now and then. You say something out of anger. But then, and another thing, parents never apologize. I don't know about you, but for me, no. But my dad apologized, to be honest. He would say he was sorry. My mom never, most African mothers don't apologize. Why? Do they think that they are too good? Do they think that they are assistant Jesus Christ? You are a human being too. You get it wrong. So apologize. So for example, if I had a child and I said something to my child that was hurtful, I'd go back and apologize. I don't think it takes anything away from me. In fact, I think it teaches your children how to be accountable. Right? Because I'm sure that's where that nonsense even started from. I always came first in school because they used to lie. And then they'll lie and, their words are, the beginning and the end in the household. So everybody's parents came first. Whose parents was the one that was coming last? We don't know. But yeah, so I think that, the onus is on us as a new generation to just change this narrative, because whether we like it or not, there are way too many teenagers carrying around so much on their shoulders by virtue of the words that have been spoken to and over them. And there are many adults like us who are carrying around scars, who don't even know how to be any other way because of the way we have been told that we are from our teenage years. And so bringing those kind of things front and center should be the motivation to just change the narrative and, end that cycle. Period.
There was hyperprotection for boys, for young teenage girls back then. Does the same still apply today? And what are the effects of it on both genders?
So I remember my teenage years, I have a brother who is very close in age, like we're about a year apart. And I think about how we grew up and it was like chalk and cheese. So I was one, you must stay at home, you must learn how to cook, you must learn. And he didn't have to do anything. And somehow, even though he was older than me, I was somehow responsible for him because I was a girl. And it didn't make sense to me. Those were part of the things. I told you, my teenagers were very confusing. Those are one of the things that confused the heck out of me. I remember a very funny situation. So there was a birthday party. It was my friend's birthday party. And I remember at this time, must have been about 16, 17, because we're just finished. Yeah, we must have been in SS3 or we had just finished school. I think we were in SS3 at the time, to be honest, or we had just finished school. And it was my friend's birthday party. And I was going with another friend of mine, a family friend of ours. And so her dad was the one that dropped us at the place. So he took me, my friend, and my brother. And we got to the place, to the party. It was a house party, obviously. Her parents were there. So it was a nice, wholesome party. And just across where she lived was a venue. It was a place, a lagoon front venue. And my brother came and told us that, there's a party there tonight. Now, back in the days, there were those cool clubs. I'm sure you know them. I want to see ABC, Groove Theory, all these other people. And they were having a party there that night. And my brother came and he was like, there's a party in this place. And so-and-so is going to be here. So-and-so is going to be, all the happening boys and girls. It's going to be here. It's going to be here. I was like, wow. Meanwhile, they had come to tell me that one of the club boys had said, I told my brother that, how far are you with your sister? So it was obvious that maybe he kind of had interest in me, even though we had never spoken or anything like that. My brother was like, and this guy is going to be there, and he was asking after you. I thought about it. I was like, wow. But in my mind, I knew that I could never think of going to this party, because first of all, these are, when they used to call them night parties, because we will go to day parties, right? Just like this birthday party was. It was a day party, and this was a night party at a venue with all these club boys. My brother was like, nothing, let's just go, let's stay in the I was like, how will we stay? What will we say? My brother said, we can say that we got stuck in the elevator of the building. Now, note that back then there were no phones, nothing to track you. You just get picked up or dropped off. But I was like, My liver was not this. My brother was like, anyway, he is going because our neighbor was at the party. And he was like, he is going now. And that he will come back with our neighbor. I was like, okay. Oh. And I think it wasn't so strange to me because I'd seen him get away with a lot of things. So I knew that he'll probably get away with this. So me, as much as the so-and-so is asking of me, this party looks like it's going to be fun, they will not catch me there because I don't know. Like, to me, I couldn't fathom being at this party and just, giving some flippant lie. I knew I wouldn't get away with it. And so I went home. Got home bright and early. By 6:30, I was already out. My brother was now chilling, waiting for the party. The party would have started like 10 o'clock. But my neighbor was there and they were going to just hang out. And then, after a whole day going to party, everything. So I was tired and I slept. I went to bed early, slept. And in the middle of my sleep, this must have been about 1 a.m. or so. Next thing, someone is shaking me, wake up, wake up. And I'm like, and it's my parents. And they are frantic, get up, come to our room, get up. So, they came to my room to wake up. So I was like, but you know how you're very drowsy and tired? And I'm like, what's going on? So I went and I was like, why are you sleeping like that? Are you drunk? And I'm like, drunk? I didn't understand. Where's your brother? I was like, I don't know. You went to the party together and you're back and you're saying you don't know. I said, yes. He saw our neighbor and he says that our neighbor will bring him back. Now I knew I had to cover for him because that's what's standard. That's what you do, right? But at the same time, I wasn't so sure. In my mind, I didn't think that he wouldn't be back home by 1 a.m. Because I was thinking, whatever happens, he will come back in a decent enough time to maybe give his elevator story and they will buy it. And I was like, so you mean to tell me you don't know where your brother is? I'm like, I don't know. And so they were just like, what kind of irresponsible behavior? Anyway, I was getting all this flack. And anyway, just go back to bed. And I go back to my bed and I started crying because I was distraught. I was sad. And I was like, why did I? And I remember my brother saying, just stay for this party. In my mind, I was like, I should have stayed for this party. If I was there, who would they be beating to wake up? Who would they have been waking up to ask where I was? Anyway, I went back to sleep eventually. And when I finally woke up in the morning, the first thing I did when I woke up, I was like, yes, what happened last night? Was it a dream? And I went to my brother's room and he was there sleeping. In my anger, I just took a pillow and just threw it at him, and then he woke up. And the first thing this boy did was smile at me. I said, you missed. Imagine. I was like, what happened? What happened? I was trying to tell me, I was like, that the party was very nice. That the party was so nice that my neighbor got drunk and couldn't drive them back. And so he found a phone. I don't know. Yeah, maybe used the phone at the venue to call my parents to come and pick him. I said, hey, you called them. What happened? He said nothing. So both my parents got in their car, drove from our house that was on the mainland to the island at an ungodly hours, must have been like 2 a.m. and picked him up. I said, when they picked you, what happened? He said, first of all, he told them that my neighbor's car was spoiled. So before they came, they had opened the bonnet of the car, left it open, and guys just surrounded the car. And then when they came, I said, so when you entered the car, what happened? He said nothing. That my parents just quietly told him, the next time, if you want to go to a party, tell us. There's no need for all this sneaking around and stuff. Just tell us. We'll drop you. And when you need, just like how you have called us now, and you need a ride, we'll come and pick you up. And they brought him back home. Needless to say that when I heard this story, I lost my mind. I was like, oh, do you know what happened to me last night? How I was woken up like a thief in the night and interrogated about you. And this was, I didn't know what he told me. He said, you see, I told you should have come. And retrospectively, I should have gone for that party. But the standards were different. I knew that there was no way. Because when I asked him what happened, I expected that immediately my mother came down from the car and saw him. She would have removed her shoe, stoned him, rushed him, held him in, what do they call it, police hook, and taken him into the car to bring home. Because I am imagining that would be what would have happened to me if the roles were reversed, if I was in my brother's shoes. But instead, he got a quiet talk and an invitation to let them know in future so that they will chaperone and chauffeur him to and fro this party. That's just an example of the kind of disparity that existed back then. I don't know about this generation, to be honest. It's a very important thing to a very interesting thing to ponder. Are we really raising girls a certain way and raising boys a certain way still? Because, I mean, we heard that whole it's a man's world, but things have evolved since then. Now there's the feminist movement, equality, equity, and all these fights for gender balance and parity and stuff. But back then it was so glaring. Where the boy is like, oh, he's a boy, leave him alone. And the girl is like, what kind of wife do you want to be? Is this how you want to something? So it was crazy. Because the expectations on female children and firstborn female children, the Adas, like I am, in an Igbo family, different. Obviously, you know there's an episode on the podcast heavy on Easy Lies the Head. And that really discusses that whole expectation of a female child. The first female child or the first daughter of a family. Now, these things worry me. They do. Because as much as there's a responsibility to raise, responsible, capable, independent children, why is it the women that are raised like that? And we're raised like that only to come up into a world where we have to fight for our place in the workspace, in everywhere. So why are we raised like that? And then we have to still come up and still fight for the space. Then the people that get a free pass just get a free pass in life. And I'm talking about the men in this instance. So there definitely is that disparity. And I think it's something that we should be very conscious of and really think about when we're raising. For me, I feel like we should raise children equally. I don't really believe that thing of is a man's world still. Back then, yes, James Brown sang about it and all, but in reality, it's not like a man's world all the time. I mean, think of all the people who live in the UK, in Canada, where if there's a problem, they come and the first thing they do is throw the man out of the house. So it's not a man's world there. So how about we start to raise children or, raise young children and bring up our teenagers that will become young adults and adults in a way where, we don't have to fight for equality and parity when we get to our adult, stages in life. I mean, that's what I think. I'm interested to know what you think.
What's your hashtag, what I wish I knew as a teenager?
My hashtag, what I wish I knew as a teenager. I wish I knew that those years would pass. And that the more time between my teenage years and my adult years passed, that the pain would fade, the confusion would get clearer, and things won't seem as bad as they were. Yeah, that's what I wish I knew. Well, I mean, those experiences did bring me to this point, but I believe that the experiences could have been better than they were. They were not nice experiences, yes. But then retrospectively, they could have been different experiences. They didn't have to be the way they were. And I said that because they seemed very long. You know how you feel like you're traveling on a road where there's no light at the end of the tunnel? That's how I felt during my teenage years. I didn't know where the light at the end of the tunnel was going to be. But now I know that there's a light. That the road, the more the years passed, the more time passed, I'll get to see the light. So, yeah. So yes, that's basically my thoughts and my musings about episode 1, my own person. I'd be interested to know what your definition of your own person is. What was your teenage experience like? And more importantly, what was your hashtag, what I wish I knew as a teenager? Share on all our social media pages. We cannot wait to interact with you and to see what you share with us on Share My Experience. See you again.